Have you ever wondered what happens when a foreigner, say an American citizen, lives here, owns property here, and writes their will here in the Philippines? Does that will have to go all the way back to the US to be considered valid? Well, the Supreme Court weighed in on this exact issue, and the answer is fascinating. Let's break down the case.
Okay, to get a handle on this, we're going to follow the classic legal digest format. We'll start with the facts of the case, get to the core issue, see what the Supreme Court decided, and then unpack their reasoning, the legal doctrine that came out of it, and finally the outcome. All right, first things first. To understand the court's decision, you got to know the story behind it. So let's lay out the facts. So here's how it all went down. We have Luz Lipson, a U.S. citizen, who creates her will right here in Ariga City. A few years later, she passes away. Her chosen executor, Royal Gaspi, does what you're supposed to do. He files a petition to have the will probated, or legally recognized, by the local court. But just 3 days later, the regional trial court dismisses the petition. The reason? They said they had no jurisdiction because she was an American, and that dismissal is what kicked this whole thing up to the Supreme Court.
So, that single action by the lower court brings us to the absolute heart of the matter, the one central question that the Supreme Court needed to settle.
And here it is, the big question. Does a Philippine court actually have the power to handle the will of a foreigner if that will was made on Philippine soil? Or was the lower court right? Does the whole process have to begin in the foreigner's home country first?
All right, so how did the highest court in the land answer that question? Let's get to the ruling. The Supreme Court's answer was a clear, direct, and unmistakable yes. A Philippine court absolutely can take on the case.
And here it is, straight from the horse's mouth. The court says the petition is granted, and the lower court's orders are reversed and set aside. In legal terms, that's not just a disagreement, it's a complete takedown of the previous decision. Now, knowing the answer is one thing, but understanding the why, the court's reasoning, or what lawyers call the ratio decidendi, that's where the real lesson is. So let's dig into how the Supreme Court explained the lower court's mistake. Okay, so the court starts by breaking down a really critical legal distinction, extrinsic versus intrinsic validity. See, when a will is first presented for probate, the court's job is to look at its extrinsic validity. That just means checking the formalities. Was it signed properly? Were there witnesses? It's not about the intrinsic part yet, which deals with the content, like who inherits what. And this quote from Justice Leonen's opinion really hits the nail on the head. This is exactly where the trial court went wrong. It applied the nationality principle, which says a foreigner's own national law governs their will, to the wrong part of the process. That principle is for the intrinsic stuff, not the extrinsic formalities. The Supreme Court pointed to two crucial articles in our civil code. You've got Article 16, the nationality principle, which covers the substance of the will, who gets the property. But then you have Article 17, the principle of lex loci celebrationis, which basically means the law of the place where the act is done. This article says that the formalities of the will are governed by the law of the country where it was made. Since Luz Lipson's will was executed in Ariga City, Philippine law governs its formal requirements. And it gets even clearer. The court pointed to Articles 816 and 817. These articles specifically address a foreigner's will, and Article 817 explicitly says that a will made by an alien in the Philippines can be probated according to our laws. So the law itself gives the executor the choice. Royal Gaspi was just following the options laid out in the Civil Code. So after going through all that, what is the big legal principle here? What's the main doctrine we should all remember from this case? This is the controlling doctrine, and it's super important. A Philippine court has jurisdiction. It doesn't matter if the will hasn't been probated in the foreigner's home country. Why? Because you have to separate the two issues. For the formalities of the will, you follow the law of the place it was made. For the substance, who gets what, you follow the person's national law. And since there was property, or what lawyers call res, in the Philippines, our courts have the power to step in. So let's bring it all home. What was the Supreme Court's final order? What happens to the case now? The final disposition was crystal clear. First, the Supreme Court officially nullified the RTC's dismissal orders. They're gone. Second, the case was remanded, which is a legal term for sent back, to the very same court in Ariga City. Only this time, the RTC has clear instructions. Proceed with the probate hearing and determine the will's extrinsic validity, just like the law says. This ruling is about more than just one will. It's a powerful affirmation of legal clarity and fairness. It sends a clear message that our laws provide a stable, predictable system for anyone, no matter their nationality, who chooses to build a life and own property here. It ensures that when it comes to something as personal and important as a last will, there's a clear and accessible path forward right here in the Philippines.